How much do we read our Bibles? How much do we read our Bibles or study our Bibles? I know it's accepted just read the Bible and then you did your duty. But I think it's a little bit more difficult than that, because reading the Bible is just the first step, right? So I don't want to say that you reading the Bible is not enough. I just feel like that we have to push ourselves a little bit sometimes. There's a number of doctrines in my head that I could imagine that I've never really studied, and they need to be studied. Whenever I get into a subject, I start listening to a number of different viewpoints and look at the interpretation of certain scriptures. And then I say, okay, now what is honest and truest to the context? Which argument gave the best context-related interpretation? And so that's how it has to be. You got to do your due diligence to go into the Greek text. You got to go into the Hebrew if necessary, and you got to see how let's say the Greek text of the Old Testament, the Septuagint, translates that specific word from Hebrew, and if we see any correlation or with other New Testament scriptures using the same word. And so I think that's just how it has to be done. And once we realize that, and then we see, and that's going to be one verse, let's say, right? But when you have a number of verses that relate to that topic, you got to do that with every single verse. You got to put in the work. We have to. We don't want to be ignorant, right? And so a lot of times you might have a specific view, and then you read all those scriptures through the lens of the view you hold. So that's the challenge. And so you have to read it in its historical context, see if the beliefs that you have is exactly what the beliefs the original audience would have had, or the author of that book would have had. And that's the sticky issue, because we're supposed to believe exactly what the apostles believed. If you say, no, there's a doctrine, Christian doctrine in development, like the doctrine of the Trinity and eschatology, etc. Over time, we will have a better understanding of what the apostles said. They didn't know it for sure because they were way back primitive, 2,000 years before, so they wouldn't know how the development of Christian doctrine would have been. It's like, wait a minute. Now you're assuming that a Christian today could have a better understanding than the apostles. And I reject that. That is false. Absolutely false. You cannot have a different view of the apostles. Then you can't claim to be apostolic. And you cannot claim to be have the same beliefs as the first century church. You cannot have the same beliefs as the first century church if you think a specific doctrine has been developed over time and therefore it's just as orthodoxy as the apostles. No such thing as that. Jesus prayed that we should have the same beliefs as the apostles did, the same beliefs as he gave to the apostles. That's apostolic. So if you want to be apostolic, don't just use that word for a name of a church. You really have to get back to what the apostles believed and the first century church believed in order to be a true and real apostolic. Okay? All right. God bless. Search the scriptures. Be vicious. I've heard people that say they pray so hard their knees has bumps in it, right? Well, there's a history and story about the Apostle James being that way. But how many of us has studied so hard that, sometimes your head hurts? And so you could just ask a few people who have studied like this, and they're going to say, my head hurts. I'm stressed out. Hey, it's part of the battle. It's part of it. And if you say, no, it's too confusing, well, if you're going to be drowned in scripture, sometimes you have to unbelief a lot of the things you believe. You got to throw out, and sometimes it's hard. Sometimes you have to look at it from a different perspective. So, I know I should have ended this video already, but just wanted to point that out too. It's a good point. All right, brothers, God bless. And sisters out there, have a happy Thanksgiving. Everybody that watches my videos, God bless. And hopefully you'll be blessed by this video. Like, comment, share. As someone says to be an apostolic, but they don't care about what the apostles actually believed, you can share this with them, all right? All right, goodbye.